Fill
It
it.
is. No, we're good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever happens, happens. That's going to be fine.
I like this version of Kristen.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, I didn't straighten my
Get her
hair
done.
today. It's curly. I'm just like, whatever. Like,
Get her
I've got my
done.
wine here. It's all good.
Oh,
Oh, I'm so jealous.
me too.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Let's start
I'm
it
ready to
out.
skim through. Do you want me to start since I'm doing the first couple? Just say we're Team Mahogany and we will be discussing adolescent tobacco use, a national social justice issue, because that's on our first page.
That sounds
And then,
great.
okay. This vulnerable population slide. This population is comprised of impressionable children and adolescents. It is defined by Erickson as the identity versus role confusion stage of psychosocial development. They are vulnerable to outside influences that shape who they see themselves as now and in their future. According to Aday's model of vulnerability, there are many indications that this population is included as one that is at risk. In this model, social status refers to age, gender, race, and ethnicity. The adolescent population includes minors that have incomplete brain development and immature decision making abilities. According to the CDC, quote, higher levels of education are associated with longer life and an increased likelihood of obtaining or understanding basic health information and services needed to make appropriate health decisions, end quote. This population is at the beginning of higher learning and as such needs more time to mature and grow. Social capital in Aday's model refers to social networks. They have less power in family structure, peer groups with others who are also vulnerable, and they influence each other. Because of their age, psychosocial development stage, and vulnerability towards marketing, this population is considered at high risk, and tobacco companies are well aware of this vulnerability. Young people and adolescents obviously do not always act in ways that serve their own best interests. They can be prompted to make poor decisions that can put them at risk and leave them vulnerable to physical or psychological harm that may have a negative impact on their long term health. If we are to serve and protect them, we must have a full appreciation of these environmental influences as well as society's opportunities to shape them, good or bad. That's a very long slide. Should I cut some of that out?
No, you're good.
Okay, theoretical support. Healthy People 2020 defines health equity as, quote, the attainment of the highest level of health for all people, end quote. The dangers of tobacco have been on the forefront of healthcare radar for generations. Why are we not able to protect this vulnerable population from marketing schemes that will most certainly affect their health both now and in their future? Rates of tobacco initiation is highest among adolescents, with 9 out of 10 smokers starting before the age of 18. The nature of this vulnerable population leads to an increased number of smoking initiations. That's what our whole thing is about. Bev Malone, in the chapter entitled The Search for Impermeable Boundaries, says, quote, the nurse finds herself not only concerned with the care of the individual, but with the health of a people. Our children as a vulnerable population deserve to be protected and shown that they can have confidence that they aren't being targeted for someone else's financial gain at the detriment of their own health. Am I getting too thick in there?
You're good.
You're good.
Sally Thorne, author of Nursing as Social Justice, A Case for Emancipatory Disciplinary Theorizing, says the professions have an obligation which goes beyond accepting the current state of affairs to shaping the reality of future, end quote. The tobacco marketers are infiltrating nice neighborhoods and walled communities and spreading their venom at virtually every checkout counter in America. This vulnerable population is extremely influenced by what they see, and the dangers of their choices are not obvious to their immature minds. According to a Gallup poll, nurses are the most trusted profession in the U.S. As such, we have a responsibility to speak up for the vulnerable and maintain that trust that we are so graciously given. We are health promoters, and we cannot be silent. Bev Malone also says not only are we healers, we are warriors. We can stand united and insist on changes that will protect this vulnerable population. They are not just an arbitrary group of individuals that we are protecting. These are our children. We have a vested interest because they are the face of our future. Epidemiological description. 38 million Americans smoke cigarettes. In 2018, about 7 of every 100 middle school students and 27 of every 100 high school students reported current use of some type of tobacco product. Cigarette smoking is responsible for more than 480,000 deaths per year in the United States, with 41,000 additional deaths resulting from secondhand smoke exposure. 1 out of every 3 cardiovascular deaths is caused by smoking, and on average, smokers die 10 years earlier than non-smokers. 1 in every $6 spent towards healthcare is for cardiovascular disease, and smoking-related illnesses account for more than $170 billion in healthcare costs annually. That's the end of mine.
Okay. So the clinical, as we look at the clinical impact and the social justice implications, the key points are that the average age of a new smoker is age 13 in the United States. Again, this is our vulnerable population as being marketed to and targeted. 9 out of 10 smokers begin before the age of 18. So again, the tobacco companies are catching this group in their most vulnerable years. During 2017 and 2018, the current use of e-cigarettes among high school students increased 78%. And among middle school students, rates rose by 48%. So while, never mind. Tobacco packaging and flavors are extremely enticing, and they're marketed directly towards teens. We'll see on the next slide that that the marketing strategies that they use are mimicking those of candy. Tobacco companies place most of their advertisements in stores where 75% of teens shop at least once per week. Okay, policy solutions. So when we're looking at how to solve this clinical and social justice problem, the first thing that we look at is instituting a policy of plain packaging in the United States. As you can see from the pictures of the skull and the Swisher Sweet, both of those are based, the packaging is based almost identically on candy packaging. When we look at the social determinants of health theory, we understand that there are layers of impact on decision making, and really the solution must start at the government level with government restrictions on packaging. This government level is the largest shell to institute the policy, and then it trickles down to social relationships and affects what are my friends doing when children are sorry, I'm like really out of it right now. I don't know. I got to figure it out. All right. Results in the individual risk factor shell are then affected by, okay, I'll get that together. Disease is determined by genetic and pathophysiological shells and increased cost for the system. So again, I'll go through that a little bit better. I have to look at the social determinants of health as I'm talking about it. Next slide. So then another solution is looking specifically at instituting national tobacco education programs in public schools. These educational programs must focus on addressing structural inequities through unconditional positive regard for adolescents, recognizing that they are autonomous and helping them to learn to make those healthy decisions. And also fortifying their support networks, both their peer groups and their families. This solution is based also on the social determinants of health, with the government, in this case being the Department of Education, instituting policies that trickle down to local or school level, and then to social networks, peer groups, and families. Education in schools has been shown to reduce teenage smoking compared to non-smoking schools, and adolescence is a heightened vulnerable period for starting tobacco use. In 2013, a Cochrane review of 49 studies demonstrated a decrease in the uptake of smoking in adolescents that had received smoking prevention education. again, guys, I'll do better on that.
So the winners and losers from adolescent tobacco use, basically who gains is the tobacco companies in general, and who loses are the people. In 2016, tobacco companies spent $9.5 billion in marketing cigarettes and smokeless tobacco in the United States. That equates to $1 million an hour. During 2017, about 249 billion cigarettes were sold in the United States alone. I'm sure we could build a bridge to China with 249 billion cigarettes. The average retail price of a pack of 20 cigarettes, that's the full price brands, including federal, state, and state excise tax, ranged from about $5.12 in Missouri to a high of over $10 and 66 cents in New York City. Who loses? Of course, the people do. Smoking-related illness in the United States costs more than $300 billion each year. If cigarette smoking continues at the current rate among youth in this country, 5.6 million of Americans younger than 18 will die early from smoking-related illness. And each day in the United States, about 2,000 youth under the age of 18 smoke their first cigarette, and more than 300 youth under the age of 18 become daily cigarette smoker users. Smoking causes $156 billion in lost productivity each year. So, who bears the cost of the solutions to our policy solutions? So, the current national average per capita spending on tobacco education is around $2.47 per student. If we increase that at $1 per capita nationally, it has the potential to reduce smoking by 8%, nationally in adolescents alone. However, the people that did the study found that an increase in tobacco taxes has more effect on smoking prevention than the education does. In California, where education in the classroom has been successful, it is paid for by the California Board of Education, and an average of $1,500 per school is spent. So tobaccos claim that the cost of branding, dropping branding and using plain packaging, of course, saves them money. But actually, when they have started this in Australia, prices rose the first year higher than the rate of inflation for cigarettes. So the big tobacco claims that the plain packaging would decrease costs and increase use is really kind of false claim. The packaging, as far as saving the tobacco companies, it may have saved them money, but it actually costs the people more to smoke.
So for our clinical solution, when we're talking about tobacco plain packaging, we think about increasing the FDA control of plain packaging. So in early 2009, Bill 1256 was introduced, and this was actually to amend the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act to provide the regulation of tobacco products through the Food and Drug Administration. Now, at this time, it had tremendous support. It had 178 co-sponsors and over 100 organizations lobbied for approval of this bill. And it was actually then signed into a law on June 22nd of 2009. So when you kind of look into this, you see that the FDA does regulate some of the packaging, but it's really lacking in what they actually require. So, for example, the products have to say that they contain nicotine, which is an addictive substance, but there's really not much more that goes into that. For example, in Australia, they are working on complete plain packaging, which is more literally a white background with the health risks labeled on the outside of the container. So we are suggesting to amend HR 1256 to include control over the marketing of tobacco products and the plain packaging, and also increase the fines associated with regulation violations. If you look into what the FDA actually charges retailers if they do not comply, I mean, the first offense is a warning letter. The max fine is only a little over 11 grand, and that's 6 violation in 48 months. I don't know about you, but that's just not a lot of money for these retailers and these tobacco companies. That's barely a slap on the wrist. Using the mill-stop process, we're suggesting, once again, to amend 1256 for tighter control over marketing and packaging of tobacco products. I kind of veered off my script there. For our social justice solution, we are including trying to initiate the standardization of tobacco education in public schools. So with our vulnerable populations being youth, by educating them, we're actually empowering them to make educated, informed decisions in regards to tobacco use. By using the Middlestead process as part of our agenda setting, we would introduce our education program to the Department of Education and ask for their support. It has been shown that school-based interventions can reduce or even postpone the onset of smoking among adolescents by about 20 to 40%. The education programs that have been shown to be the most successful include peer education programs, media literacy training, and case-based simulation to help resist the influence of peers and tobacco marketers. So I don't really know. I didn't come up with a closing statement because I wasn't sure what you wanted me to say at the end, since I will be closing it out.
Well, we've got to facilitate a question and answer session. I mean, I think just opening it up for questions would be the appropriate thing.
Yeah.
Or is there like one sentence or something we could sum it up? Due to the vulnerability.
Once, like, I can just come up with I'll come up with one sentence, just kind of rounding it out. Tying it with a bow and saying, hey, do you have questions?
Perfect.
Yep.
Put it in plain packaging, though, Rachel.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. How much time was that?
I think about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Great.
And that's right where we want it to be.
Yeah. Again, I need to wrap my mind around mine a little bit different and sort of talk it out in my mind.
I saw that you had changed out my picture, which is great, but that's why I had that there to show like how they all work together.
I know. My mind needs to see the picture to be able to talk about it, but I think that
that's why I had that there for me, so I could like understand like how they all were related. So
yeah,
I guess you could make the candy smaller and then put that other picture somewhere else if you want that visual. You don't have to have it, but
I think that she had Dr. Baker had mentioned in a I think when I was watching Tam, your BBB that you did just with Dr. Baker. Yep.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Sorry, I watched it though. I was there in solidarity. She did say that she likes those images and really was like, you got to put those in there. So.
Well, could we shrink this one and put the large one there in its place? So like maybe shrink this one down and like stick it in the corner. Let me just see. And then put that other one back.
That's fine.
Yeah, fine with me.
I mean, I don't know. I'm just like throwing out a suggestion.
Mm-hmm. And Kristen, if you don't mind, when you talk about the solutions, do you mind making the distinction between this is our clinical solution and this is our
solution? Absolutely. I will do that for sure.
He makes a point about that too.
Yes, for sure.
And then it also, that's what I was trying to do. So it wrapped into each piece of the conclusion.
Yeah, perfect.
And she just said really stress on that second epidemiology that the rates of adolescents initiating smoking is much higher than adults. That's because of the marketing and the vulnerable. And I think that kind
Exactly.
of needs to be what our summation is at the end.
Yes.
That our vulnerable population and the marketing has obviously done something, because 9 out of 10 smokers began before the age of 18. I mean, we don't have to bring that up again, but the fact that there definitely is a greater initiation in our population.
Absolutely. I had that written down on my notes page, but I didn't actually look at my notes page, which was evident as I was speaking.
Well, this was a run through.
That's exactly.
Yeah.
A run through is great. So that's really, really good. So are we, let's see. Sonia, do you have the,
yeah.
I like what you've done there. That looks nice.
Yeah,
I'm trying to fade it out though a little bit. I'm trying to get it to where it's not so bright.
Well, then we have to put this over there.
Yeah, I'm going to. I hadn't got there yet.
Okay.
So I faded it out a little bit so it's not so distracting. And then I'll go back and get that thing.
Cool.
I'm in that class right now. That wonderful class.
What class?
729.
I got you.
Sonia's just got a high opinion of this right now.
What? What are y'all talking about?
Nothing.
She's ready to be done. So am I, but I got a long way to go. I don't have 3 days left.
I know, seriously.
Yeah, I'm over it and I got a long way to go. I think it's hard because I don't have a motivation. Like, it doesn't help me in my job. It doesn't do anything. It's just for me. You know what I mean? So I'm just.
I hear you.
I have no motivation to keep going except for the simple fact that I know somewhere in the future it will benefit me.
Well, that's basically the only reason that I have to do it. And then, of course, they announced it in my staff meeting this week. We have a few congratulations in order. And so they announced me as Dr. Sonia Suttle. And of course, the physicians in there look like they could all just lay me out.
Yeah.
That's all right.
I won't even get that. So.
You know what? See, in my setting, I will get that because, you know, my counterpart in the counseling services, she's a PhD prepared clinical psychologist. So for me, it's like, okay, my department's got to have someone with a doctorate there. I'll get zero extra money though. None.
I didn't get nothing.
Oh, no.
Do you want to hear something? You want to hear something very ironic? My annual review was immediately after my presentation, my DNP presentation. Goose egg. Nothing.
Yeah.
Guys, I'm in like what's called an internship thing. I get paid less now than I did as an RN.
Oh, wow.
That's painful. Sorry.
That's painful.
Yeah.
And he's not going to care that I have the DNP, but that's for my future. So
exactly.
I'd like to teach. So yeah, but luckily his mother has an EDD. So, and the whole reason she said she got her degree was so when she made reservations, she could say, "This is Dr. Herbst," and then so he's okay with. But I can't be called doctor, obviously, at work.
That would be can be
confusing. Yeah, that'd be nice. Someday when I teach, I can be.
I can and I will.
Right? No, I just paid how many thousands of dollars just for potential?
My patients call me Dr. Sonia.
Oh, nice.
My patients, when I was in OB, when I was doing outpatient OB, my patients would call me Dr. Kristen all the time. And I'm like, no. And they're like, but you're just like a doctor. Especially my you know, like non-English speaking patients. They'd be like, Dr. Kristen. I'm like,
Yeah. Sounds good, but don't say it in front of anybody else.
But at the same time, it's incredibly, there is no translation for nurse practitioner in most other languages.
Right.
Like if you go to Spanish and you say enfermera
That's a
practicar,
nurse. Right.
it's like a practicing nurse, which is not at all what you're trying to say. And so it's just like, you know, and I've talked to translators and they're like, there's nothing you could say. You just, and when I worked in the hospital and I used translators, they would introduce me as, she's just like a doctor. And that would be all.
Yeah.
She's a nurse, but she's just like a doctor.
How many times when you tell your patients that you're a nurse practitioner, because I don't like them to think that I'm an MD. They'll say, "Oh, well, you're like one to me, and you're better than any doctor I've ever had." And you're my doctor. I don't care whether you're a doctor or not. You're my doctor. Do your patients do you like that?
Yeah, well, not my college students, because they just like, please, they don't care.
I have to say nurse practitioner because I have to also say that the cardiologist will see you later. So they really don't care what I think. They're like, oh, well, the cardiologist is coming later. Who cares?
Yeah, you know what? I just, in the past, always, you know, I was just like, I told them once or twice, I'm not a doctor. And then after a while, I'm like, you can call me what you need to call me. It's okay. Like, I feel like I've like done my due diligence and told you who I am. And in your, like, culturally, that just is the way you want to say it, and that's fine. But yeah. So. All right. So are we
okay? Let's look at that and see if y'all like that. If that's okay with y'all.
I think that's
yes. That's so much better. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. That's good. So,
Kristen, if you take it out, I'll break your fingers.
I won't take it out.
That was me. Don't blame Kristen.
I was going to say, I don't think I took it out the first time.
She suggested, I was like, yeah, that looks good. I'll do it.
Oh, it was you.
I could have let Kristen take the fall. That was close.
Okay. All right, Rachel, break your fingers.
All right. Well,
so leave the complete sentences on them for now. Just leave it as it is.
Let's leave it as it is.
Just leave it as it is. I looked through the rubric to see if she said anything about complete sentences while we were doing this, just to make sure. And I didn't see anything about complete sentences. At this point, if she takes off 3 points, are we all going to die?
I think I'm confused with the slide requirements. Because, for example, like the conclusion was like 2 slides, but it also included, I feel like it's very blended. Like the winners and losers was one thing, but then was also part of the conclusion.
Yeah, so exactly.
If she gets that nitpicky, then I don't know, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then we have to do those teamwork things the same way all over again.
And then we have to write like 2 responses
by
to other
Sunday
people's
night.
things.
Wait, what?
There's responses that we have to write.
Yeah, that's our reflection.
Oh, by next week or this week?
When everybody's done. What does that do?
I don't know.
I have that under week 11, post reflection in response to one question posed in team social justice analysis. So
yeah.
It's due next week.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I'm basically going to like cough on a paper and hand that in. I don't know. All right. So are we good if I turn in these slides tonight just to have them in before tomorrow?
Yes.
And are we good if I turn in all of our
team discussion
conversations? Yeah. Anything we add after this doesn't need to be documented.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, are we supposed to watch other people's? Are we supposed to get on the calendar and see when all the different groups?
2 others, because we have to write 2 responses.
Right, but do we have to watch them, or will they be posted somewhere and we watch them like from a link? Or we have to actually be there?
I think they're recorded. Yeah.
They better
So
be
from a
recorded.
link. So we don't have to go to anybody else's.
We will be watching the other group that's presenting at the same time as us.
Okay, right.
So that's one. And then we just have to find a second one. I think we'll be fine.
Cool.
All right.
I'm
over it.
I have 2
Yep.
It keeps putting in my other account, so that's going to look funky. But anyway,
Who cares? It's fine.
Yeah. Okay. It's a better picture than the real thing anyway. So whatever.
Whatever.
All right. Bye, ladies.
Okay.
All
I'm
right.
good.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
I'm
guys.
good. Thanks,
Bye.
guys. I'll see you on Sunday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.